Are you tired of going out in the wintertime and catching zero fish? Well, today we're going to talk about how you can fix that problem. Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Before we get into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, punch the notification bell. It helps us out with all the engagement on the channel, and I try to respond to every single comment, so thank you ahead of time. Well, you know what? Wintertime is tough enough as it is. The bass seemingly disappear. We've talked about that. There's just not the quick presentations that we can do in the spring, summer, and fall to get those fast bites or those power fishing bites. So I want to talk about what can you do, okay, if you go out there and you've been catching zero fish. What is a presentation? What is a technique, a bait that you can use that puts numbers in the boat in the wintertime? Now, I want to preface ahead of time, they may not all be 3, 4, 5, 6 pounders. You may catch a lot of small fish. But when you go out on a winter day, you just want to catch something. And the more numbers that you catch, the more likely you are to get a real good one. So today we're going to focus on a Ned Rig technique that works really well in the wintertime, and it's slightly different than how you would fish it in the spring, summer, and fall. So that's what I want to go over in detail today. I have right here your traditional Ned Rig. This is a small version right here. There's so many different Ned Rig baits out on the market today, but this is your very traditional Ned Rig setup. So this is what we're going to be using, and I would definitely want to recommend that we focus on natural colors this time of year. Why? Because in the winter time, the lakes and not always the rivers, but sometimes rivers, definitely your smaller streams and reservoirs, but your lakes and reservoirs are about as clear as they're ever going to be throughout the year. So going with your natural colors in the wintertime is where I always start. And then if you want to tweak and make some adjustments from there, you definitely can. As far as the weight goes, that's going to be completely determined on the depth and the wind. A lot of the lakes that I fish, I'm fishing this down in 20 foot, 30 foot, 40 foot range. So I'm going to go with about the heaviest Ned Rig weight that I can get on the marketplace. If you're fishing from the bank and some farm ponds, those types of things, I would go with about the lightest weight that you can possibly use. But the weight is going to be determined on the depth and the wind. So if you have about the lightest and the heaviest and maybe one right in the middle, you're going to be okay for most winter fishing situations. As far as the line goes, this is a time when I'm probably going to go with fluoro, 6-pound fluoro. I do want it to help on the sink rate a little bit, and also fluoro is a little bit clearer. It's harder for the fish to see. That's why so many people use it on leaders. If you want to throw a braid with a fluoro leader, that's awesome. That's going to work too. But I'm going to go with a 6-pound fluoro in the winter time as far as that goes. Now here's something with the rod that you're going to want to really check, and maybe the rod that you're using for your wintertime Ned rigging is going to be different than the one that you're using in the summertime. You want to have a rod that's got a really nice limber tip to it. If you've ever seen an ice fishing pole, some of them have those spring tips on the end, those spring bobber tips on the end. And the reason they have those is because the bite can be so light you may not notice it otherwise. So get yourself a rod that has got a super limber tip on it. This one here, probably I would like to go even more limber than this one, a tip that's just really, really, really sensitive, and the backbone picks up a little farther down in the rod as opposed to one of those extra fast that pick up right up there in the tip. So a really limber rod is going to be critical for Ned rigging in the winter time. And here's why. Because my #1 presentation for a Ned rig when you're not getting any bites whatsoever is I'm going to throw it out there and leave it sit. And leave it sit. And leave it sit some more. This is your traditional dead sticking method, but it works really well. It'll work in the spring and the summer and the fall as well. But in the winter time, when you're getting 0 bites, when you're not putting anything in the boat, dead stick it. Leave it sink, get to the bottom, and leave it there. And this is why I mentioned earlier, one, you want to go with natural colors, okay, because the fish are going to come right up there and just stare at this thing for the longest time. And that's why you want to go with some fluoro, either a fluoro leader or all fluoro. Make sure that they don't pick up on that line, because that bait is just going to sit there over and over and over. And if you can't stand it any longer and you got to give it a little shake or a twitch, just the slightest amount. The natural movements in the waterway, the currents and the convection as far as warmer water rising, cooler water sinking, that's going to be enough to impart action on that little tiny Ned rig. That's all that you've got to do. You got to remember, everything that's living down there where those bass are at are cold-blooded creatures, so they're moving a little bit slower. Their metabolisms are slower, but those bass still have to feed. So throw that Ned rig out there, leave it sink, and just sit. When I'm fishing this type of technique, I like to have somebody out there with me. I like to have a buddy with me, and so we can talk and kind of pass the time, because this can be a pretty boring method to fish, especially when you're trying to locate some bass. But you have to put it out there and you have to leave it sit, okay? Now you may be asking yourself, where do I even begin? We've got a video, and I can put the link down here, that talks about the 3 places that winter bass like to go. So make sure that you watch that video. It talks about it. My favorite place is to get the absolute center of some coves, creek arms, channels, get right out there in the middle and go straight down from there. Now remember, those bass are going to be belly down on the bottom, that muck and that mud. You may not pick them up on your electronics, but if you start in the absolute dead center, that's an excellent place to go. And if you're a pond fisherman, a bank fisherman from a pond, you've really got them narrowed down. Find the deepest point in that pond, and that's where you would start. And this winter Ned rigging technique can absolutely hammer them in small ponds for bank anglers that are fishing some smaller waters, especially all these retention ponds and subdivisions. This is just a super, super excellent technique that's going to work really well. Now, what about the bite? What about the hook set in this situation? Well, we talked about getting a super limber rod, because you want to watch that tip, that rod tip. You're not going to get these arm-ripping strikes. As a matter of fact, anytime you feel the slightest difference in that rod and the end of that line, go ahead and set the hook. Hook sets are free. Go ahead and set the hook. But what should your hook set look like? This isn't your big power fishing, half-ounce jigs, skipping jigs, you know, rip their lips type of a situation. All you need to do is just reel down. Go ahead and reel down and put pressure on them. These Ned Rig weights, okay, the hooks are a very light wire hook, a fine wire hook, and they penetrate the lip pretty easily. So just go ahead and reel down and put some pressure on them. That's all that you need to do. But I promise you, if you're struggling this winter and this is what you're catching 0. If you use this winter Ned rigging technique and you throw it out there and you just leave it sit, those bass are going to look at it. They're going to see it, and you are going to get bites, and there's a really good possibility you're going to catch some nice numbers on a cold winter day, just like it is today. Hey, make sure that if you have questions, drop them in the comments down below. If you like the video, go ahead and share it. Make sure that you definitely get out there and encourage someone today, because you never know how you're going to change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.